We're here with Dr. Christopher Gallen, President and CEO of NEUROMED, who presented the panel discussion, Leading Through Change, Innovation in the Future of the Biotech Industry. Can you tell us a few things that came out of your panel discussion today?
Yeah, I think that the panel began, with a focus on the fact that we're an incredibly important industry. We're in an industry that has been critical to increasing the human lifespan fourfold over the last 200 years, adding 60 years of life to the average American's lifespan. And the real question is, how do we keep this moving forward? How do we develop better generations of therapeutics that don't just treat the symptoms of disease, but that actually cure the disease? And how do we do so in a way that's efficient and effective and timely and enables the companies that produce that to actually succeed as economic entities? And with that, we sort of covered three sort of major topic areas. The first and perhaps the most discussed area was research and development and issues in research and development. And I think the key sort of foci, the points that emerged out of that were the fact that first, just quantitatively, research and development has simply not been adequate to the needs of the long-term success of the pharmaceutical industry. That's been true for several years. That the rates of our blockbusters and other compounds going off patents exceeds the rate that we've been producing those compounds, which reduces companies to a position where they're dependent on the income of smaller numbers of blockbuster compounds. The fundamental reason, there's been a couple of things that go into this, but the two big reasons I think that we discussed a great deal were the fact that first, the standards applied to drugs have been rising enormously. Now, aspirin would never be approved as a drug now, despite the fact that probably all of us take aspirin, right? We've raised the standards, particularly at the level of safety, to include such high standards that it makes it very, very difficult to be producing highly potent medications that can meet up with these truly remarkable standards that we've placed. Moreover, in doing so, to basically determine safety, it's relatively easy to determine safety in a small population of people. But if you study something in 100 or 200 people, you're only going to find the events that show up in 1% of the people. You're not going to find the rare events. As our attention has focused not on drugs that work for the vast majority of the people, the vast majority of the time safely, but rather on obscure side effects, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million side effects. That's resulted in the need for much bigger trials. As Dr. Levy pointed out, in diabetes, you've moved from being able to get a drug approved based on studies of 1,500 people, significant number of people, to requiring 5,000, 8,000, 10,000. Well, that's an enormous amount of expenditure to do that. And even if you're successful, that means because you spent 5 times more money on that development, you have that much less money for the other therapeutics, so your overall productivity declines, because your expense per item declines. So one was the focus on that and the changes in safety standards, which is everyone wants safe compounds. No question about it. Everyone in the industry wants safe compounds. But there's a trade-off between innovation and being able to cover a wide variety of diseases and advancing the public health in a creative way versus focusing all of your efforts on huge but very narrow programs in particular diseases. So that was sort of one key thing. I think the other thing is that as the industry has shifted from a focus on, on treating symptoms to a focus on really trying to address the fundamental causes of diseases, to cure Alzheimer's disease, to cure congestive heart failure, to cure cancer, with some successes in these diseases. That's a much more complex endeavor and much riskier endeavor. So that was sort of talking about R&D. A second big aspect that we talked about was the impact of payers and the government and influences on it. And the bottom line is that, as is probably true of every aspect of American life, the level of regulatory intrusion just grows and grows and grows. It knows no limits. The level of governmental influence knows no limits. The pressure from payers is greatly increasing. And I think that the industry has managed to cope with that to this point, has continued to manage to grow, to continue to manage to be successful. If you think about the pharmaceutical industry, globally, obviously, is one of the most important world industries. But if you think in the United States, particularly where much of the world's pharmaceutical industry is tended to be centered because this is the biggest market, this is one of the industries where America is really a successful leader around the world. So I think the industry has coped with increasing levels of regulation. There's no question that it slows up the advance of the creation of new treatments. It just draws a lot of resources away from that. And I think that's a challenge. I think that specifically one of the challenges we talked about is that the current financial troubles that the United States has run into for a variety of reasons, really stemming from the subprime loan problem, is having the effect of freezing the credit markets, causing stocks to decline, causing investments in equities to decline. And that has had the effect of wiping out the IPO market and a lot of the funding market for biotech. This is a really important problem because the biotech industry produces half of the new chemical entities that come into the treatment of man, and many of the most fundamental, scientifically intense, important therapeutics. The biotech industry is being decimated at this point and is likely to continue to be decimated. In the end, it's so important that I believe it will make a comeback. But I think that before that comeback comes, half of the biotechs in the world will be gone, will be eliminated. So that's a major change. I think the pharmas will weather this change well because they're financially much more sound, but the biotechs, which are dependent on the equity markets, will be adversely affected. And that's mainly a financial issue. It does have governmental issues, things like Sarbanes-Oxley costs against biotech companies publicly, et cetera, have been quite negative in terms of their impact. But it's mainly an issue of the finance markets. The last thing we talked about is what direction is this going? And I think that there's no doubt that the CRO industry, I think, has grown enormously. It's a robust, important industry, and it's taken a critical role in terms of handling the operational aspects of things. The day-to-day execution, people, events, getting things done on a day-to-day basis, and has done so really well, and has won an increasing proportion of the business from the pharmaceutical industry for that. And I think that that's likely to grow. I think that R&D in general is likely to flatten or slow down, partly for economic reasons, but partly because of increased governmental pressure. I mean, you look at the fact that R&D growth dropped from 15% a year prior to the Hillary Care thoughts of nationalizing healthcare, dropped down to 5% a year. And it took several years before, basically because people saw that the return on investment was not going to be there. It took several years to get back up to 10%, and now it's dropped down again to about 5%. So R&D will grow, but it'll grow slowly. But I think that what will grow as another part of that is the CRO penetration of the pharmaceutical industry, outsourcing more and more of the operational components as the pharmas focus on doing great science, great programs, great protocols, great reports, great commercialization strategies to do this sort of strategic scientific piece in a better way than we've been doing it. I think that they'll end up divesting a great deal of the operational capacities to CROs.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you speaking with us today.